evening, everybody. Hello. Are you guys even awake? Yes? Do we need to have you stand up and stretch? No? Okay. Are you sure? Are you guys all awake? These guys aren't, but that's okay. All right, so who can tell me what we've been talking about the last 3 weeks? Rhythm. All right. So throughout the Rhythm series, we've been talking about what it looks like to love God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and all your mind and all of your strength. And tonight we want to focus specifically on what loving God with your mind looks like in everyday life. So how many of us have actually thought about loving God with our minds? What does that look like? I don't know. And to be honest, I hadn't ever really given it any thought until Virgil had asked me to speak. He said, Kymber, hey, do you want to speak? We're doing a lesson or a series on worship. I was like, heck yeah. That's what I do every day. That's what I know all about. That's what I went to school for. Right? And he said, okay, I want you to speak on how we worship God with our minds. And I paused for a second. He handed it to me, and I looked it over, and I looked at my mom, and I said, is there any other one that I can do, because this one seems really hard? I was like, I don't even know how to worship God with my mind, so how am I supposed to teach these kids how to do it? Right? Because when you think about the scripture that says you're to love your God with all of your heart, all of your soul, and all your mind, and all your strength, you're like, I already love God with all my mind. You don't really think about what that actually means, or what that actually looks like, right? So I hadn't really ever given any thought to my thinking at all. So not only did I not ever think about loving God with my mind, I wasn't really sure what thinking about my thinking looked like, okay? So what I tend to pay attention to, and what I'm sure you guys all pay attention to as well, is my feelings, right? Or how you feel in any given situation. So positive emotions, those can lead to positive thinking, and positive thinking can lead to positive emotions, and the opposite is true, where negative emotions lead to negative thinking, and negative thinking can lead to negative emotions, and it's kind of like just a wicked circle, right? And so our negative emotions can lead to a lot of negative thinking, and over time that can affect the way that we think about others, that we think about ourselves, and ultimately what we think about God. Okay? We often put a lot of stock in those feelings, and they can often dictate our thoughts. Now, let me make this, I don't necessarily believe that we can control our thoughts, okay? But I do believe that we can control or can take control of how often different types of thoughts come through our minds, okay? And whether we give those thoughts any time of day. So let's keep all of that in mind with all of our emotions and our thinking and just all of those different things, and take a look at a couple of verses in John. So as most of us know, John is one of the 4 books of the New Testament that tell us of Jesus' life here on earth. Okay? And when we look at these verses, keep in mind that the people Jesus was talking to, were pretty confused of who Jesus really was and is. And Jesus turned his attention to those who seemed to believe in him and what he said, and he tells them this. If you abide in my word, and you truly are my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Okay? So Jesus wanted these people to know the truth. Why? Because, like he said in John, in truth, there is freedom. And we gain our freedom by understanding what is real and what is right in any given situation, even when we don't feel like it. Okay? So you might say, Kymber, that sounds great. It feels natural and easy to say that all I got to do is ground myself in truth. But what on earth does that look like when life happens? When you have a really awful day, just a truly awful day. When you get a rejection letter from that college that you really wanted to go to. Or when you find out that the person you really liked and that you were talking to was talking to somebody else also. Yeah, that's not a good one, yeah. Or when we fail a test, right? So I could go on about all of those negative things, but I feel like you guys kind of get the point. So in moments like those, saying the truth sets us free doesn't really seem like it's enough to combat all of those negative emotions that we start feeling every time something like that happens. So let's look at something that Paul wrote to the Corinthian church in 2 Corinthians. So he says in 2 Corinthians 10:5, We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. So Paul tells them to destroy all of those thoughts that aren't what they absolutely know to be true, and take captive every thought like an army would their enemy. Why, though? So we can make our thoughts obedient to Christ. But how? How do you make those thoughts obedient to Christ? Because if you can't control your emotions, how are you supposed to then take all of those thoughts captive, right? And how are you supposed to make those thoughts obedient to Christ? This is the question I've spent the last 2 months talking with everybody I know about how to do it. I spent many journaling sessions at Starbucks trying to figure it out. So I'd heard this verse more than once and just decided that it sounded good, and I never really took the time to actually look at it and figure out what taking my thoughts captive actually looked like. And so let's look at 2 Corinthians 10:3-4. And these are the verses right before Paul tells us to take our thoughts captive. He says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds." Okay, so not only are we battling things on the outside that people can see, right? Not only are you fighting with your friends or having an argument with your parents or just anything on the outside that people can see with their naked eye, right? We're also battling things within our minds that people can't see, right? So I know for me, the devil likes to pull up things that I haven't thought about in years to try and break me down. Okay, just the other day, I don't know if you guys knew, but I'm a substitute teacher. Just super cool, yay. Nobody's excited about that, that's okay. You don't have to be. But just the other day, I was subbing in a class and I handed out their worksheet. And on this worksheet, their teacher asked me to please make sure that they didn't talk to each other. They needed to do it on their own. It wasn't a test, but they needed to make sure that they knew what they were supposed to be doing, and I was supposed to take out the worksheet at the end of the class. So I was walking around the desks, looking and making sure that the students were doing what they were supposed to be doing. And I look over, and these two friends are whispering to each other, right? So I look over and I walk over to them and I start to say something, when all of a sudden I'm reminded of something that I did in 7th grade. So in 7th grade, I was taking this really important test. And my best friend Sarah, it didn't matter how much I studied, how much time I spent in my notes, my best friend Sarah would always have the answer right. She never had to give her notes a second look, okay? She did so good on every test, and she never had to give it a second look. And so I thought, if I don't know the answer, and it was a midterm, so you know that those are really important, right? If I don't know the answer, Sarah's going to know the answer. And so I studied and did as much as I could, and I got to this one question. And it wasn't this easy question like mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right? It's the one thing everybody remembers from school. But it was some just crazy question that I knew the answer to, and I knew I had studied it, but just couldn't remember. And so I was like, Sarah's sitting right beside me. If I just look over, I can get the answer from her. And so I did. I know cheating on a test is not that big of a deal, but it was still one of those things that I hadn't thought of and I felt really guilty about. And I ended up going to my teacher later and telling her what had happened. Because I was honest, I got to retake the test. And so honesty is always the best policy. They're not all that nice, but if it's the first time that you did something and you come clean about it, usually you get not a free pass, but anyway, that's beside the point. And so I was reminded of that time when I had cheated on the test, and I'm going to tell these students that they can't be cheating on their worksheet, and these thoughts come to my mind of, you're a fraud, you couldn't even do a 7th grade science test. How are you supposed to be telling these kids and teaching these kids that they can't be cheating on anything? What gives you the right to stop them from cheating when you know you did in the past? What makes you think that you could be here teaching these kids? And there were several other thoughts to that same tune, and I went to say something to those kids, and I froze because I couldn't even get the words out to tell them that they didn't need to be cheating, right? That if they had continued to do what they were going to do, I was going to make them separate and then make a note to their teacher that they were cheating on their worksheet, okay? Now, thankfully, they saw me walking toward them, and so they immediately stopped what they were doing. But I had to walk back to the teacher's test or the teacher's desk and remind myself of the truth, that I am loved and that I am forgiven, And I have repented since then and am no longer under control of that sin, of that test that I cheated on. And so let's look back at our verse, right? What is our weapon? What is our truth? Now, I meant to bring my Bible up here, but it's sitting in my car, so it's not up here. Okay, but pretend that this is a Bible. Okay, so what is our weapon? The Bible, imaginary Bible that's right here. My phone's back there, so I can't even hold that up. I have no Bible up here. And so that Bible is our truth, right? And the Word of God is our truth and our weapon that can help us destroy strongholds and take captive our thoughts, right? All of those bad thoughts that I was having of I was a fraud and that I couldn't be teaching these kids, right? My truth came from the Word of that I am loved and that I am no longer under control of that sin, right? And so I was able to combat those thoughts because I knew I had the truth. And the truth that I reminded myself helped me remember those things, right? So how can we destroy those strongholds and take captive our thoughts? We know what our weapon is, but how exactly do we use it to help us take captive our thoughts? This is a question that I dealt with for a lot longer than I care to admit, and I asked several people, how do we do this? How do we do this? And it actually came down to I was sitting at Starbucks across from one of my really good friends, and we were just talking about it, of my upcoming speaking, what I was going to be talking about. And she said, well, that part in Romans where it says renew your mind, what does that look like? Right? And even these last 3 weeks, we've been talking a lot about renewal of the mind and all of that stuff on Sunday mornings. And so it just kind of like helped bring that into, I guess, my mind. But I believe that the answer to that question, the answer to how we take those thoughts captive, or at least part of that answer, is by the renewal of our mind, okay? So let's look at Romans 12:2, okay? It says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God and what is good and acceptable and perfect. Okay? Now the easiest way, and I say easiest, but it's really not easy, right? I spent the last several months just putting this into play or into practice in my own life. Okay? Is by spending time in the Word. And you're told to spend, start with 5 minutes and then slowly work your way up of like how long you spend each day in your devotionals and reading the Word, but how many of us actually do that every day, right? And so you start with the Word, okay? And so the word renew means to give fresh life or new life or strength to, or to replace, okay? So by taking those negative thoughts that we have and replacing them with the truth of the Word. Okay, now I put together a really simple demonstration for you guys. Just demonstrating how we can use the sword of the Spirit, our biblical truth, to start destroying those thoughts and replacing them. So if my mama will come up here, okay, and then I need 3 lovely youth volunteers. All right, so I'll have Zach and Ethan and Jillian. All y'all come up here, take these tiny swords. There's a real reason for them. They just kind of look funny. And then stand right here. Don't go anywhere. Just anywhere that you want to stand as long as you're over there. Okay, so, all right, so let's pretend my mom, okay? And I'm using my mom because I know that she would never think these things about me or anybody else in this room, okay? But I'm going to use my mom as the negative thought, okay? So my mom represents the thought of, you're a fraud, you're unloved, right? Nobody wants you, you're worthless, okay? Now remember, my mom would never think these things, okay? She's just the person that's acting as that thought, okay? And so it doesn't matter. I can be here, right? And then something happens, right? I get a rejection letter. I really wanted to go to that super awesome college, OU, because it's the best college ever. And then, they send me a rejection letter, okay? They tell me, I can't go. And then I have that, oh man, I'm not good enough for that college. What college am I going to be good enough for? Right? And that negative thought starts walking towards me. I'll be like, whatever, that's not true, right? And I can move over here, okay? But there's nothing that is stopping her, right? So it doesn't matter how far I move, okay? She can still come running after me. And then I get all the way back over to the wall, and there's nothing else, right? That thought is then able to reach me, okay? So come back over here, all right? But without anything there, that thought can get to me, okay? And I know it seems kind of silly, okay, but it's true. If you don't have anything there, then that thought will always get to you. It doesn't matter how far you run. It doesn't matter what you think to yourself. That thought will get to you, okay? But these lovely men and woman, right? This lovely young lady, these are going to represent our biblical truth. Okay, so which one do you have?
I have Isaiah 41, 96 through 10.
That's 9b through 10.
9b through 10.
All right, so if you'll come down here. So if you'll throw Isaiah 41 up there. All right, so Isaiah 41, 9b through 10 says, I have chosen you. Fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, and I will help you, and I will uphold you with my righteous hand. All right, so if I'm feeling unloved, if I feel like I can't do this, well, here in the Bible, God says, I have chosen you. Right? So here's my biblical truth. Okay? He has a little sword, like the Bible, right? Ethan, what do you have?
1 John 4, 9 through 10.
All right, 1 John 4, 9 through 10. In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his only Son into the world, so that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we have loved, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Right? So in this again, if I'm feeling unloved, if I feel like I am not worth it, right? That verse right there says that I am, okay? So here we have our other sword, our biblical truth, right? Okay. Jillian has Jeremiah 31:3, and this says, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore, I've continued my faithfulness to you. All right, so not only did God love me yesterday, he loves me today, he loves me tomorrow, he loves me forever. Right? So all of those thoughts, if you are unloved and you are not worth it, well, that right there says that I am, okay? So Jillian has her sword, right? Okay. So now, this negative thought that's telling me that I am unloved and I am unworthy, right? All of these swords, all of these things are pushing her away, okay? So just like, right? She keeps walking and walking, and then over here, right? Back there we have our jail, okay? And that's where we're going to hold all of our negative thoughts, right? Because we take captive those thoughts and we destroy them and we put them in jail, okay? So that they can no longer get to me. All right, does that make sense? Yeah? It's a really simple demonstration, but it helps, I think, yeah. All right, you guys can go sit down. You can keep your swords if you want to. You don't have to. They're super cheesy, so I totally understand if you don't want them. It's fine. Right, so, and with those truths surrounding me, that thought no longer has passage to me and can no longer get there. So please note that I am not saying that these thoughts will automatically go away, right? But the more time you spend in the Word and the more that we begin replacing these thoughts with that biblical truth, I believe that we can lessen the amount that they come around, okay? And it becomes easier to combat them. So the more truth that you have in your mind, the easier that it is for you to remind yourself of those things, and you take your tiny swords and push it away into the jail, right? Okay. So when those thoughts arise, you then have the weapons that you need to fight them, okay? You can worship God with your mind. It seems like a weird thought, but you can worship God with your mind. Yeah? And all of this worshiping God with your mind, right, starts with recognizing the lies that you yourself are prone to believe. Find those lies and take them captive, whatever it is, no matter if, I feel unloved today. I'm a fraud. I'm not worth it, right? I can't go do that thing. I can't go have a job because I'm not good with people, right? Or I can't go work there. I can't go to that school because I'm not good enough. I'm not worth it. All of those things. Well, if you take those lies that you know that you typically believe, you find them and you take them captive and you throw them in that jail, push them away with your tiny little swords, okay? Find your truth your tiny little swords that you can dwell on, rather than the lies that the devil tries to throw your way. Okay? Focus on the truth that sets you free. Because as we see in John 4:24, God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So if we begin filling our minds with his truth, and we begin taking our thoughts captive and replacing all of those lies with that truth that we know that God says about us, and we know that is in that word that we know is true because the word is always true, okay? And we begin filling our minds with that truth, we can worship God with our minds, okay? So if you guys will stand with me, all right? And everybody bow your heads and close your eyes. We're going to pray, okay? So dear Heavenly Father, I thank you just for the opportunity that I had tonight, even just for this short time to come and just teach these kids something that I have learned even over these past 3 months when I was handed that script and told, hey, we want you to talk about this, and I had no clue how I was going to do it. God, I thank you just for the clarity that you gave me over these 3 months to be able to speak to them, and I pray that each and every one of these words, God, made it into their minds, God, that they will be able to take their thoughts captive, and that they know your truth, God, and that truth will set them free from any and every thought that they have. All of those negativity, all of that, God, that they will be able to replace that with your truth, God, and in that they will be able to worship you with their minds. In your name we pray. Amen.